Welcome to Eye on the Illini. This is Mike Cagley. Tonight I'm going to be joined by Louie Vaccher. He's the publisher of the WildcatReport.com. That's the Northwestern rivals site. He's going to talk to us about what Illinois is facing on Saturday when they try to become bowl eligible. We'll also talk a little bit about the Pac-12 invasion of the Big Ten, and we will talk about Jim Harbaugh because he's the gift that keeps giving. We'll be right back in a minute. Welcome to Eye on the Illini. This is Mike Cagley. We're very fortunate today to have Louie Vaccher, who is the publisher of the WildcatReport.com. That's really the Northwestern rivals site. And we have got, he's been doing this for a long time. He's going to be able to give us a little bit of perspective on what the Illini are running into this week. And Louie, I'm going to start this conversation off with something I said in our radio shows last week. I don't know how, and realistically, I don't know how Coach Braun wouldn't be not only the Big Ten Coach of the Year, but the National Coach of the Year. I think the over-under for wins that most prognosticators were giving Northwestern was 2. And they're going to go bowling this year. I don't know if I've seen in recent memory a better coaching job compared to what he was handed, which was a team in the middle of a horrible scandal, and what coach has produced. Am I totally nuts, or what are your thoughts on that?
If you're nuts, I'm nuts too, because I agree with you 100%. I think he's the Big Ten Coach of the Year. I think he'll get consideration nationally. The Vegas line was 2.5 wins, which, and I think a lot of people said 2 wins, that they'd beat Howard and UTEP, and that would, go winless in the Big Ten. And, you talk about a team in disarray. In July, they lose Pat Fitzgerald, a program icon. All those guys came to Northwestern a great deal because of Coach Fitz. He was such a beloved figure, a magnetic personality, and really the face of the program for so long. They lose him. You got this scandal that's ugly. It was handled so badly by the administration. You got former players suing the school. You got Fitz suing the school. I mean, it was just ugly. And, David Braun, a guy that arrived in January with no head coaching experience, no FBS experience. And, they picked him, the players picked him to lead the program. And he's been, so far exceeded anyone's expectations. He's just managed to keep them focused week to week. And you saw right away that they were playing hard. They may not have been playing too well early in the season, but as the season gone on, his defense, he's also the defensive coordinator too, on top of it. That's wow. What he came in for, and they didn't have time to bring someone else in July. So he calls the plays on defense as well. And they really improved defensively. They do enough offensively. And they are a hard-nosed football team, and they're sitting here at 6-5 now. I picked them 4-8 this year, and I think I was the most optimistic I think I saw out there in terms of wins, and they've blown that out of the water too. They could, a couple wins. I think if Ben Bryant hadn't gotten hurt, I think if they could have beaten Nebraska, I think they had a shot to beat Iowa too. They could have easily won the West. I think a lot of schools in the Big Ten West probably feel like that, but this season I think could have even been more than it was. But he's done just an outstanding job, and last week he got rewarded. They took the interim tag off, and he's now the head coach, 5-year contract. So he earned it, that's for sure.
Oh, I kudos out to him. What a magnificent coaching job. Coach Bielema's going up against the 4th first-year coach on their schedule, having shockingly lost to the prior 3. Losing to Purdue, losing to Nebraska, losing to Wisconsin. The Wisconsin game was the one that Illinois fans hold as, a little bit of a rough time because of the issues of Johnny Newton being kicked out of the game. and then, Wisconsin rushing back in the rally in his absence. But he's not had good fortune against first year coaches, and not even, didn't matter whether it was home or away. So this game has Illini fans nervous, especially older ones like myself who can remember even when Northwestern wasn't good and Illinois was good, those games were always nip and tuck, and Northwestern's done a good job of throwing a monkey wrench into Illinois plans on more than one occasion. So as we look at this team, can you give us a description of what Illinois fans can look for when the Northwestern offense is on the field?
Yeah, so I mean, Northwestern's offense, they don't score a lot of points. They don't rack up a whole lot of yards. They do just enough to win, And though I will say that when they have Ben Bryant at quarterback, they're a very different team. He came back for the Wisconsin game 2 weeks ago, and they played the best half I think Northwestern's played since 2020. They were magnificent. They scored all 4 times they had the ball, 3 touchdowns and a field goal, had 24 points at the half. Which exceeded their, season average for a game. So he's a very efficient guy, not very mobile, but he knows where the ball's supposed to go. He gets rid of it, and puts it in people's hands the way he's supposed to. The guy is he's a savvy veteran. This is his 6th year of college football. It's his 3rd year as a starter. He's Eastern Michigan, Cincinnati, and now he's at Northwestern. And when he's at the controls, they're a much better team. They throw the ball around quite a bit with him. They've got 3 pretty good receivers. I think this is their best starting receiver core they've had in quite a long time. They got AJ Henning is sort of the burner. Cam Johnson is the guy. He's like a physical possession receiver. And then you got Bryce Kurtz as their number 1 receiver in terms of numbers, and he's a guy that has a little bit of speed, but he's a dangerous guy in his own right. So the running game hasn't really been there this year. It resurrected last week though. Cam Porter ran for 95 yards and had a couple touchdowns, and that's the first time in a while we've seen that. So when they can get both things going, they can be, I wouldn't call them a dangerous offense, but they can be efficient, and they basically been doing enough to win, but they win with their defense. Offense does just enough to get them a win. I mean, that's really the formula that they used for Pat Fitzgerald most of his career, right? I mean, not a lot of sexy offenses in the last decade for Northwestern. They didn't score a whole lot of points, but they played tough defense under Mike Hankwitz, the old coordinator, and that's how they won games. And they've kind of gotten back to that this year. And, the offense, like I said, nothing spectacular. They do give up a lot of sacks. That's something to watch on Saturday. But they've done enough to get them here at 6-5 with a game to go.
Yeah, and that's where I guess the Illini fans get nervous because they have been so effective. How is that offensive line, and how, what do you think they do to slow down the law firm of Newton and Randolph?
Yeah, that's going to be a challenge. I mean, Northwestern's given up a lot of sacks all year. Penn State got them 8 times. Even last week it was 5. I mean, a lot of teams get to them, and part of that is Ben Bryant's not very mobile, and sometimes he might hold on to the ball a little too long. I think that's a criticism you see of him. It's not all on the offensive line. I'll say that. But the last couple of weeks, I think they've been better. They were outstanding against Wisconsin. That was their best game of the year by far. And they did some things that, they did some things in the running game. They got the running game going a little bit against the Badgers, and then they were much better against Purdue on the ground. I would say though, overall, if you looked at a position group that maybe the most disappointing this year is probably the offensive line. I thought, they have some veterans up there that have played quite a bit of football. And I think people, Josh Preeb, a guard, is a guy that's been there a long time, and Ben Rather at center. And, they've had some guys that I thought a little more was expected, especially in the pass protection area. But that, like I said, they've improved a little bit in the last couple of weeks, but I think Illinois is going to be a big challenge to try to keep the pocket clean for Ben Bryant, because he's a guy, if you pressure him, he's a lot better when there's not a whole lot of pressure, and he's not very mobile. So that's something that Northwestern is going to have to watch on Saturday.
Yeah, and it is interesting to see. Illinois got a very athletic defensive backfield, but they are either young and or inexperienced at a lot of those positions, because you had 3 guys go to the NFL. And Taz Nicholson can get you a spectacular play, or he can get you a very head shaking play that you just can't believe he might have done. And it's been feast or famine for that Illinois defensive backfield. How do you think that matchup will look? Because again, Northwestern, as you said, has a pretty accomplished group of wide receivers out there.
Yeah, that's where I think Northwestern has the advantage, at least offensively. I think, like I said, they've got some guy, Cam Johnson really broke out last week. He had a big touchdown, like a run after the catch, where he put a move on a guy and took it in. I think it was 50. Yeah, I can't remember how many yards it was, but it was a long one. So he's an established guy. He's a 6th-year guy, came over. He was first at Vanderbilt, then at Arizona State. He's played a lot of football. AJ Henning, this is his 4th year, came from Michigan, and he's a burner. He's a guy that can stretch the field on you. They haven't done it a whole lot this year, but it's something you got to be wary of. And we don't get many guys like that. We don't see many guys like that in Evanston. So it's something. He's got another year or two. And then Bryce Kurtz is a guy that's just, he puts up a lot of numbers. He's kind of the safety blanket. I think when Ben Bryant's looking for somebody, he first looks for number 17 this year. So that's one thing. And they have some tight ends that they use too. They got a few different guys they like to use in there. That's something to watch. And Joseph Hyman is a sophomore running back that is pretty accomplished as a receiver out of the backfield as well. So I think that's where, if Northwestern has an advantage offensively, it's probably in the pass game, where they've got some pretty good targets. And if Bryant can get time, he's a very efficient, effective, and accurate quarterback.
Yeah, and that bodes to be an interesting matchup. Again, the start of the season, it's so hard to know who's going to do what, but again, a lot of people had put down a W a long time ago for Illinois, and then as they got closer to the game here, they were like, well, I'm glad I wrote that in pencil, because they're just not certain. When you got a team that's already qualified for a bowl, I guess we're hoping that the motivation is a little higher on the Illinois side to make sure they do qualify.
I just did the math. The last 2 years, Illinois has outscored Northwestern 88-17. Brett Bielema, I tell you what, Brett Bielema got the better of Fitz at Wisconsin, and then the last 2 years at Illinois. So, we got, new sheriff in town up here in Evanston, but we'll see. They've had problems with Brett Bielema coach teams for quite a while now. And, I think they got embarrassed last 2 years, really. So we'll see. I think Northwestern's got a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, but you're right. I think Illinois, if they want to play another game, they got to win.
Yeah, they have no choice there.
Yeah.
Now as we look, let's go to the special teams. Illinois had enough of Torrey Taylor last week, and you can understand why he is such a fantastic special teams weapon for Iowa, because Iowa lets him practice often, not only on the practice field, but in games. What do the special teams look like for the Wildcats? And let's start maybe with the punting. How's Hunter doing, and how do you kind of categorize the kicking game for the Wildcats?
Yeah, so Hunter Renner is, like, statistically the worst punter in the Big Ten. I just looked at it, right? He's averaging 39 yards a punt, which is dead last. But I think that's very deceptive because what they do is they do a lot of directional kicking, a lot of rugby kicking. There'll be a lot of times they'll take the snap, take a few steps one direction or the other and kick it away. And they just try to keep it away from people and angle it toward the sidelines and do all that kind of stuff. So he's been much more effective than his numbers give him credit. You know, he can boom it on occasion. And I'll tell you what, he had a couple games this year where he was really a difference maker. I can think of the Penn State game that he dropped. I can't remember how many kicks inside the 10. He got them a couple times deep in their own territory that really kept Northwestern in the game. And you know, when your offense struggles as much as Northwestern's has this year, that's a very big thing is the punt game. Now he's shanked some too, and he is the last ranked punter in the Big Ten, but I think that he's a little better than people give him credit for. And Northwestern is, like I said, an offense where punting is going to matter. I'm sure it will on Saturday. That he's got to be strategic in where he lands those punts and try to make, Northwestern plays a kind of a bend but don't break defense. So if they can get the Illini deep in their own territory, that bodes very well. They want to make you snap the ball 10, 12 times if you're going to score. They'll give you the underneath stuff and just try to keep it in front of them and, see if you do something to get behind the sticks, whether it's a penalty, a sack, a TFL, whatever it is, and then you get in trouble. That's kind of their MO, and punting is a big part of that.
Yeah, and it's that of course, again, we're shaping up to see the ultimate in a Big Ten West matchup. This is the type of football that you really have to play, and Iowa dominates that division. And
nobody does it better than them.
Yeah, and we're seeing that.
Yeah, and I tell you what, I'm going to miss the West. I know people make fun of it all the time, but I tell you, with the 4 new schools coming in and going back to one division, I don't know if Northwestern's ever going to see Indy again, for the Big Ten title game. It's going to get awfully hard to get there.
I keep thinking what they will end up doing is, by 2030, could be even sooner, but that's the next time the contracts are up. I almost see them targeting 6 more teams, which would put you at 24. And then you have 4 6-team divisions. And then you go back to a more regional, geography. And you have 4 coaches who win division titles, and then they play a 3-game series to see who is the Big Ten champion. The Big Ten gets 2 extra games on national TV, and everybody's happy. I think the NFL model is what they are looking for, and I wouldn't be surprised to see the SEC do the same thing. What we will.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Yeah.
Yeah. Save the tape, and people can either laugh at me or go, "Wow, that guy guessed right." Yeah. How are they from a kick returning and punt returning standpoint? How does Northwestern shape up there?
Yeah, so they haven't done a whole lot this year. It's been better in years past. Like Fitz was Mr. Fair Catch. They never took any chances. He just wanted to get his offense back on the field. And, they have AJ Henning, and he's been close a couple times, and I think he's ranked 5th in the Big Ten or something like that. He's averaging 23 yards, and he's been close to breaking them. So I would say they haven't done much this year, but they're dangerous. They have number 8, and he's a guy to watch because he does have that speed that can bust one open. He's had a couple, to get to midfield or something like that. But we've been kind of waiting all season to see if he can break one. He's only got 1 game left, so we'll have to see. So they got him on kick returns and the same on punt returns. He's a guy that you have to watch. I think, where Northwestern is much better in the kicking game this year. Jack Olson is 13 of 15 on the season. He's been very accurate. As long as I think 47 on the year. They don't take too many long shots, but he's been automatic. He's been a big weapon because they've really struggled there the last couple of years. As the last 2 years, as you know, Northwestern's been 4-20 overall, and they've been so much better in the field goal area. And that's, again, when you got a limited offense, low scoring games, Big Ten West, having a good field goal kicker is very important. And so many of these games come down to, 2-3 points, and they can be the difference in the game.
Yeah. And the special teams is something that, Illinois, they last week was the Caleb Griffin had a 52-yard field goal that just literally died. And, that thing goes through and it's a whole different game.
Oh yeah.
There. And they maybe come out with the win. And, those are the small plays that of course coaches, they look back at and they say, well, if you take these 4 or 5 plays, they had Hugh Robertson, usually a pretty solid punter, kind of opened the door at the end of the game with a line drive 35-yard punt that and then was returned for 17 yards. And, Iowa has to go 55 yards for that final score, as opposed to going, 75 or something like that if you get a little bit better play, both in the getting the ball up in the air and from a return standpoint. So if we go down to the offense, or excuse me, go to the defense. Yeah. I was thinking Illinois. When Illinois is on offense, Paddock and Altmaier, 2 slightly different quarterbacks. I think Paddock has a harder time seeing over the line, not quite as tall of a guy, and doesn't have the wheels, but does have puts a lot of balls. I mean, he had at least 5 drops that hit guys in the hands last week. That again, if you argue if they catch 4 of those 5, Illinois probably wins the game relatively easy. What kind of pass rush does Northwestern going to throw at the Illinois offensive line that, while it's getting much better, has probably overall been a frustrating unit because it was expected to be better than it has been?
Yeah. So yeah, in terms of pass rush, Northwestern's been, I think, a little better than I expected anyway. I mean, they're kind of middle of the pack if you look, in the Big Ten numbers and pass rush and stuff like that. They have had Aiden Hubbard emerge, and he's a young guy. This is his first extended playing time of his career, and he leads the team. He's got 6 sacks. And they like to send linebackers. Xander Mueller is a guy. He's second with 5. He's kind of like the big play guy, it seems like. So they like to send him in there, and he's had some success too. They got this guy Anto Saka, who's in his second year, has emerged a little bit. He hardly played last year, and he's emerged too as a guy that I think has high motor. He's got some quick twitch stuff that I think in a year or 2 he could be a heck of a player, and you can see signs of it this year. But yeah, Northwestern, they don't make a whole lot of big plays defensively. They're, like I talked about earlier, they're more of a bend but don't break, but they can get there. And even if their sack numbers are low, they can, put some pressure and get some guys to move off their spot a little bit and bring some heat in the passing game. And that's really all they need. Their secondary is pretty strong. So if they can get to the passer, I think they're in pretty good shape.
And then from a rushing standpoint, Illinois is down to Reggie Love because Fagan, McCray, Lowry are all, out for the season. So that we're down to that, and Nick Fidanzo, who is certainly the X factor when you look at that. Well, what kind of run defense is Northwestern playing, and how effective have they been at stopping the run?
Yeah, so I tell you what, going into last Saturday, I felt pretty good about the defense. Now, Northwestern's numbers defensively don't look too good, and I think they're kind of skewed by what happened earlier in the season because they've been steadily getting better, week by week, and I think they're right now they're a pretty sound fundamental defense. But last Saturday scared me a little bit because Purdue ran for 303 yards. I mean, that's a heck of a lot of yards. They got down to Northwestern's 1 yard line. They got to the 15. I think it was a total of 6 times they got in Northwestern territory and got 0 points out of it. They had like 3 turnovers on downs, a pick, a fumble, and they squandered a lot of opportunities, but they racked up a lot of yards, and a lot of that came on the ground. Tyrone Tracy had like 160 yards. Maccabee was, he had a pretty good day too. So they really did some damage, and that concerns me a little bit going into Saturday's game. I know Illinois hasn't been the rushing offense that we expected them to be this year. And like you said, they're a little bit banged up, but that's an area of concern. And, that's if you get Brett Bielema, how would he like to play? That's the way he'd like to play, is just run the ball down their throats. And I think Northwestern's going to have to prove that they can be better, certainly, than they were last week, or they're going to get in trouble.
Yeah, that 30 plus straight plays of running by Michigan, that's the type of thing that Coach B, I think he goes to bed and dreams of things like that,
I think a lot of coaches do.
Yeah.
In his defense, I mean, Fitz would be the same way. Yeah, I don't have a feel for Braun quite yet, but Fitz was the same way.
Now, when it comes to either Paddock or if Altmaier gets in for the passing, Isaiah Williams has arguably been, I think he and of course Marvin Harrison Jr. have been probably the clear all Big Ten wide receivers this year. What is he going to face when the DBs decide they're going to try to find ways to stop him?
Yeah, Northwestern's secondary has been a pleasant surprise this year. I think, they had 2 guys, their 2 corners are starting really, getting the first extended time of their careers, and Garnett Hollis. Well, Hollis played a little bit last year too. I should take that back. But Garnett Hollis on one side and Theron Johnson. This is really his first time this year. And they've been pretty solid all season long. And then they've got at safety Coco Azama, if he comes back. He was out on Saturday. We'll see what his health is like. And they got Rod Hurd back there as another fifth-year guy's played a lot of football. And they've got quite a bit of experience back there, and they play smart. And again, they play a lot of the shell coverage. They'll play cover 4, 2 deep safeties, and keep everything in front of them. And that's kind of what they do. And make you drive the field. If you're going to score on them, again, they want double-digit snaps, make you earn every yard. And then in the red zone, they've been pretty tough. And last week, their goal line short yardage defense was unbelievable. I mean, Purdue had 3 shots from inside the 2, couldn't get in. They stopped them at the 15. Again, they had a first down at, I think it was the 15-yard line. Couldn't get a first down. I mean, they were really outstanding last week.
Yeah, and that of course, Purdue having problems like that. Illinois has struggled in goal line situations as well. That's where the offensive line just isn't quite as good as what they had hoped it would be. As you look at the game, what type of game do you see in front of you, and who do you think is going to win this one?
Yeah, I think it's going to be your typical Big Ten West game, right? I mean, it's not going to be very high scoring. It's probably going to be ugly at times. I don't think either offense is going to be able to do too much. And as usual, it's the team that makes the fewest mistakes that'll probably win. It's probably going to be a close game. At least, like I said, I come back to the last 2 games, though, where Illinois really embarrassed them. So, Northwestern, I think, is a little bit motivated, and they're a confident team right now, even though last week, was not an impressive win by any stretch, but they did what they had to do. They're playing, what David Braun likes to call complementary football, and the offense is doing enough and the defense is making plays. And, last week, Purdue kind of went up and down the field until they got into the red zone, and they couldn't do anything with it. So they're feeling pretty good right now. They've got the bowl eligibility wrapped up, and I think that they'd like nothing more than to get down there and reclaim the hat. Northwestern won it, I think it was 6 straight years, and then
Yeah.
they've lost the last two, and they got embarrassed doing it. So I think they got a little bit of a score to settle, and that's going to be a motivated team. One thing is this team, week to week, no matter what's happened, they've been ready to play. Whatever happened the week before, because they, especially early in the season, they looked terrible at Rutgers. They got really whipped at Duke, and they come back the next week, focused and ready to go. And it's funny because Northwestern didn't win or lose 2 games in a row until last week. So they beat Wisconsin 2 weeks ago, and then they got a win at Purdue. It's the first time they've won 2 in a row, and we'll see if they can make it 3.
Yeah, that is kind of unique there as you look at it. And it is interesting how these teams that they just kind of struggle to get going. Although Northwestern with literally another little bit of good luck at Iowa, they could be on quite a roll right now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like I said, that they feel like the Nebraska game and the Iowa game. Those are ones that got away. They could have easily won one or both of those, and that could have made the difference. They could be playing in Indy. That's with the state of the Big Ten West right now. The teams are they're so similar, all of them. I feel like I'm having the same conversation every week.
Yeah, it is.
Everybody I talk to.
Yeah, but Wisconsin's trying to break out of it, although I thought they had an unfair burden placed on them by the media somehow for them to be picked 15th in the country, and you were going to go from from the 3 yards in a cloud of dust to air raid seemed to really a stretch that I was kind of shocked that the folks who have the experience watching a lot of college football would think they could pull off. Nothing against Luke Fickell, but I mean that's a hard magic trick, pull that rabbit out of your hat.
Oh, no question. And I think you're seeing a little bit of I don't know what you call it, cultural backlash, right? Yeah, I don't think Wisconsin fans
I lived up there for 5
Barry
years.
Ball,
Yeah, I lived up there from 90 to 95.
That's really ingrained.
Yeah, and Barry was just getting it started when I lived up there, and I know he doesn't have any formal power anymore, but he's a shadow lurking, in every area that's darkened in the hallway. There's a Barry Alvarez shadow somewhere there, and I would assume that if they're losing games in a fashion that he doesn't like, a lot of people hear the whispers. And
well, not only that, but I think the fan base and the whole that's a whole culture. They ran the same system for a long time, and now someone wants to come in and if you're successful, hey, no problem, that's great. But now they've hit some bumps in the road. They look ugly. I mean, I'll tell you, they look bad against Northwestern. That was a team that I thought Northwestern just came in and outplayed them out, hit them out, hustled them out, everything them, and they didn't quite look ready to play. And certainly their offense, that hasn't gone well. And there's some and even the way Chris left, that's gonna rankle some people. He was one of them, right? He was a Badger lifer, and the way they kicked him out, they bring in an outsider, and he wants to run this air raid. So I can see it. If you have some struggles, you're gonna hear about it. And that's what's going on.
So one last question for you. With these 4 new teams coming into the Big Ten, maybe I'll be proven really wrong on this, but to me, Washington is a really good program, but they are very dependent upon a good quarterback. I think Oregon's going to have money as long as Phil Knight's alive. They'll have money dropping out of the air to them. USC, Lincoln Riley really has to figure out if he wants to have defense. And, you even hear Jim Leonard being one of the prospective defensive coordinators, but I watched the way he plays offense and the lack of effort that he seems to care about defense. And I don't know, maybe there's better places to be a defensive coordinator, although their talent level is out of this world. And Chip Kelly at UCLA. Is there any
maybe
chance?
he saved his job?
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is the second time I think beating USC has saved his skin. Is there a chance that when these guys get into the league that they find out that while the Big Ten West teams may not be aesthetically pleasing, it's still a brutal type of football that you got to play that week in and week out, and it may not be so easy to put wins together against a Big Ten team that, you know, as opposed, you know, with the physicality of that conference versus, you know, the high flyer finesse game that you see out in the Pac-12.
Yeah.
Am I, because I wonder if they might not be as successful maybe outside of Oregon and depending on what happens with Lincoln Riley as people might be thinking. Am I crazy, or are you seeing it differently?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on what you define as success. Like, you know, will they challenge Michigan and Ohio State right away? Maybe not. But I think they could maybe, you know, slot into that kind of Penn State level where, you know, they're kind of the number 3. And then if you put things together one year, you can get into the title game, maybe win one. You know, I thought Oregon really impressed me this year, even that loss to Washington, which I think Dan Lanning cost them this year.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, that was because I thought they were the better team that day. You know, and you're right. Certainly Washington is dependent on a quarterback, and really who isn't, right? Any elite program kind of is. I do think, yeah, I think you're right in terms of when you're in the Big Ten. I think, you know, facing that week after week, that physical style of play where people are going to smack you in the mouth over and over and over and over, and you're going to get that every week, that's going to wear on you. So these teams will have to see how they hold up over the course of a year. You know, you look though, Oregon, Washington, USC, tremendous talent. I mean, those teams are certainly way more talented than Northwestern is going to be, or Illinois is going to be, most of the schools in the conference. You know, Ohio State, Michigan being a separate level. And then, you know, you got Penn State, but those other teams could be up there, you know, I think right under Michigan, Ohio State, and in that area. And when they do get a special difference maker at quarterback, they can put together a year like you're seeing out of them this year. So like I told you, you know, I don't know if, first of all, I disagree with you that the West isn't aesthetically pleasing, because I love some of those, like that Northwestern Iowa game, 10-7. I love that game. Honest to God, I thought it was the most exciting 10-7 game you'll ever see. It was, I mean, every time, every yard was so fought for, and it's not all great defense. It's inept offense as well, and both teams had backup quarterbacks. So in that sense, I get it. But like I said, I don't know if Northwestern's ever going to see Indianapolis again with the current configuration. If they stay in one conference, it's going to be tough.
One final question before we go. It's a little bit off topic, but what are your impressions of the whole Jim Harbaugh Michigan scandal? Because I do love hearing from other guys who are covering programs just to get their point of view on it.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, my first comment would be how unnecessary the whole thing is, right? You're Michigan. They're better than everybody but Ohio State, right? And they're head to head, and they've gotten the better of them the last 2. So I thought, number one, it was just unnecessary. And second, you know, the backlash from Michigan fans and social media and everything that, you know, everybody steals signs and it wasn't an advantage. Look, they broke the rules. There's rules that you can't scout. You know, you can't go to the other games and scout your opponent, which I wasn't even aware of, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
You can't do that. They definitely broke that. You can't use electronics. They definitely broke that. And, you know, all this stuff that Harbaugh wasn't aware, I don't buy. Well, first of all, now that Partridge has been fired, so at least, you know, the trail went to him, so the coaching staff knew. And to me, if every other, you know, it seemed like every coaching staff in the Big Ten knew what was going on. I kind of think Harbaugh knew what was going on. So, yeah, they got what I thought. I thought there was a pretty fair punishment, and they're without him 3 games. I don't even know if it's going to matter. You know, they're a machine. They're a pretty impressive football team, and they got a little chip on their shoulder now. So we'll see on Saturday. But to me, it's so stupid. It
Yeah.
was unnecessary.
Well,
That's my number one thing is why is Michigan doing this?
yeah, and you almost have to wonder too, Ryan Day, if they end up losing this game and he loses it to a Harbaugh less Michigan team, just how much heat is he going to take from the Ohio State
Oh
boosters
yeah.
who
Yeah.
just, three in a row.
Oh
You're
yeah.
I mean,
It's Armageddon.
already you're hearing the C word, which is Cooper. When you lose to Michigan too much, they immediately go back to John Cooper, and that becomes the
Yeah,
is
and they don't care if you won 90% of your games or whatever it is. His record is unbelievable. It's crazy, whatever it is now. But yeah, they don't care. And the other thing about the Michigan scandal I want to say too is I feel bad, not bad, but it also taints everything they've done, right?
yeah,
These last couple years. It's I don't know if it's an asterisk, but fans, you're gonna it's all in question now. How much did they know? How much of an advantage they have? And it's too bad because they had, the last 2 years they've been outstanding football teams. They were the best in the Big Ten. They made the playoffs, and now it's stained everything too.
yeah. It really does, and it's unfortunate it worked out that way. Yet at the same time, you as Illinois, who got in, they get nuked from orbit in 1967 when they turned themselves in for paying $4
Oh,
for a pizza, and meanwhile, Bear Bryant's, dropping off cars to people and, having no problems. So for Illinois fans, that knocked them out of football contention largely until Mike White showed up in 1979,
yeah,
1980. And then you had Lou Henson get his, issues done right after the Final Four. And
yeah,
that was started off with, although there were no proof of violations, the number of allegations it is making us, bring in the lack of institutional control. And it's like, wow, the lack of institutional control for not being guilty. And that really stopped Illinois from probably moving up into where Kansas is right now because of the number of people that Lou Henson had ready to go to follow up that 89 team that, kind of steered away because of the investigation. So
yeah.
Illinois fans don't have any sympathy for any school when the last two times they got hit hard were for things that wouldn't,
Yeah.
just they were so minor that it was hard to believe. And I got into an argument with Lauren Tate on the radio one day, and I told him, I said, they're not doing anything anybody else didn't do. They even didn't do it to such a degree, but they were dumb enough to get caught, and
Yeah.
it's one of those things where there's not going to be much sympathy for Michigan
Oh
because
God, no.
they would always pontificate about how good they are, and they would never do that. And then when they get their hand stuck in the cookie jar, I wonder what's going on because the NCAA was very clear that they are going to go forward with their part of the investigation now. So the Big Ten's done, but it makes you wonder what the NCAA had that the Michigan did the about face from we're going to fight this to, oh, hey, we'll take the 3-game
Well,
suspension.
yeah. That's because
So
Partridge, right? They had the link to Partridge, and now they fired him right away, and that was the kind of smoking gun where all that Bet Michigan stuff, like from the president, and it's like, gosh, I couldn't believe that. And then
yeah,
now they all got to eat their words, right?
yeah.
They
Yeah,
linked it all, and I think though this is probably the end of the Jim Harbaugh era. He's gonna go.
he'll be a bear. He'll be a
I'd
bear
be
coach.
shocked.
He'll be
Yeah,
a bear
he could
coach.
coach the Bears or anywhere else in the NFL. I think that's where he wants to get back to anyway. And now, yeah, I can't see him coming back.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, especially if you
Yeah,
could go to the Bears where he played quarterback, and if they have the first pick and maybe the third pick or whatever, might end up being slotted, you could get a Caleb Williams. You could trade away their current quarterback, and then you could go after, you could get a, offensive lineman, get the Olu from Penn State, and now all of a sudden, you've got a quarterback and he's protected on his blind side. I mean, that's a nice way to
yeah.
start your coaching career.
And Jim Harbaugh is a flake and a kind of a weirdo, to be honest. He's a
He can
strange
coach.
dude, but he wins. That guy wins. He's won everywhere.
Yep.
He won at Stanford. It took him a while at Michigan. He won it with the Niners, got him to the Super Bowl. But yeah, he'll do well wherever he goes.
His press conference that he did last week, it reminded me of Charlie Sheen because he was he never gets sick. He's the wall that viruses shatter against. And I was thinking of Tiger Blood, and then he didn't want his quarterbacks to eat chicken because chickens are too nervous. I thought to myself, this is what I pay money for. You talk about like just content by the volume. So we love that. Well, hey, I really appreciate you coming on and talking a little bit about some Big Ten stuff along with that matchup. You and I will get a chance to talk this weekend, but good luck to the Wildcats, and we look forward to hopefully a really entertaining game on Saturday.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike. And looking forward. I always look forward to the Land O'Lincoln Trophy game. That's always it's a nice thing at the end of the year to have that, kind of look forward to. And I think both teams genuinely want it. And there's a little, I wouldn't call it animosity between the two, but
there's a rivalry.
There's a rivalry. Yeah, it's there that I think both teams want to get it.
Yep, that'll be a lot of fun. Well, thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much to Louie Vaccher for coming on. Again, if you want to read his stuff, the wildcatreport.com, that's what he publishes. That's the Northwestern Rivals site. And he does a fantastic job and has done so for a long time, a font of information on Northwestern sports. And we will be back. We will have a eye on the Illini after the Western Illinois game. We look forward to that. And of course, then you get the Northwestern football game. It's going to be a very exciting weekend for Illini fans. Go Illini.